So I deployed with Recon. We went to Tikrit, Iraq.
That was your choice after you're done training and everything?
You don't have a choice, bro. Once you sign that line, it ain't your choice. But
Okay.
that's where I was put. I passed the tryout period, and then I was in Recon. I was in SKT-1, and we deployed probably about, I don't know, I want to say like 6 months after I got out of boot. So I got to train with the unit a little bit. We did some good training, got the flow, but you're never really ready until you go there. We got to Tikrit, which is in northern Iraq in Salahadin province, which is where Saddam Hussein was born. That was his city. He had a palace there, and his sons had a palace there. And it was very well known to be a very pro-Saddam and anti-American place. When we got there, the unit that we were replacing, they suffered some casualties over their deployment, and they had created a scenario in that city that was not really a great thing to walk into. There were some parts of town, like big blocks, multi-block radiuses, where there has been 0 U.S. military presence for the previous year. So they were just doing whatever the fuck they wanted. And if those people who live in that area has not seen a soldier in a year, and so they were running that place. So
it's basically no man's land for you guys.
They were called they called them the no-go zones. And I remember when we got the brief, my squad leader was like, "Are you trying to tell me that there has not been one U.S. soldier in any of these areas for the past year?" And their first sergeant was like, "That's correct." And we're like, "Oh, fucking great." I didn't know what the hell that meant, but he sure did, because this was his 4th deployment, I think, or something like that. I don't know. He was
well adversed to the situation.
Not his first rodeo. But yeah, we were there for a year, for 12 months. My first firefight was probably, I think it was sometime between the first month and the second month in country. For the first 3 weeks, you do a left seat, right seat with the unit that's leaving. So when they go on missions, they leave some of their soldiers behind, and they take the leaders from the new unit that's coming in to kind of take them on the left seat and the right seat to show them this is where we go. These are our missions. This is the city. Explain this, explain that.
Yeah, you don't want to let them go in blind.
Exactly. So that type of changeover happens pretty commonly. That's a thing that you do when you are being replaced with another unit, right? So that whole process takes a few weeks anyways before we're out doing missions independently. And we went to do a patrol. No, we had State Department people. So my platoon was tasked out with a few different types of missions. This particular one was not necessarily a combat mission. It was more of a security mission. We had State Department officials from Washington, D.C. that were in Tikrit to meet with their government and to do whole policy, politics, and stuff like that. So we were tasked out with being their private security, essentially, while they were doing their politics.
Yeah, so this isn't like a seek and kill kind of mission.
No.
It was not protect the assets.
Yes, so this wasn't a hard hit. It was not a kill or capture. It wasn't a raid. It wasn't anything like that. It was just, because of how elevated our status was within the battalion, obviously when big government says to, Army, hey, I've got delegates from the United States, from the Pentagon that are here. I need you guys to make sure that they're good. They try to put the best platoon on to make sure that nothing squirrely happens. Anyways, so we were actually about to go on an engagement with one of the government officials there in Tikrit, and we had a bunch of kids throw grenades at our convoy while we were on the street. We were fighting multiple different groups in Tikrit, different kind of terrorist organizations. Everybody's familiar with Al-Qaeda, or AQI as they call it, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, because there's Al-Qaeda everywhere. And then there's a bunch of other smaller factions of groups that are not affiliated with Al-Qaeda. As a matter of fact, a lot of them fight each other, which is interesting.
That's something they don't really talk about.
They don't really talk about it. Yeah, they don't talk about a lot of stuff in the news. They don't talk about the payoffs. They don't talk about how many sheiks get thousands of dollars in cash and tell all of their people in their community to not shoot at Americans, and then their minds change and now it's time to shoot at Americans, and then another 20, 50 grand later, we're not shooting at Americans anymore. We're on our side again. That stuff happens all the time. Sons of Iraq was one of those factions. You go into the locales and they have that thing going on too. It's very fractured, the whole scenario over there. Even if it's like we were involved in a place that had a sectarian war between Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims, right? So even amongst the Shias, they would fight against each other because ideological differences and just, the power grabbing that was occurring with the lack of military and police, Iraqi military and police. Americans can only do so much. We don't know the community. We don't understand the dynamic of what it's like to be an Iraqi person. So, wasn't really our place at that point. We weren't really capable of doing it unless you wanted like an all out, like just take care of the job. So,
last man standing
type thing, which was definitely not the case. It was not that at all. But anyways, so one of the groups we were fighting was JRTN. It's a long Arab name that we turned into an acronym. It was financed, I believe, by Saddam's daughter, who at the time was living in Syria. And it was led by one of Saddam's old generals that was very highly regarded. And one of their key things that they did was that they basically recruited children between the ages of 10 and 15 or 16 and gave them money and candy and cell phones and all this type of stuff. And then they gave them ammunition and guns and grenades, and they would tell them to hit the American convoys, right? And so one of their favorite things to do in Tikrit was RKG-3s, which are old Russian grenades. They're almost like World War II grenades. Like
the stick ones?
Yeah, the stick ones. It looks like a wine bottle, kind of, with a long neck. So what they would do is they would take those and they would create a little parachute at the end of it, and they would slice the parachute, and they'd have it hanging, and they would chuck it, and the parachute would point the projectile of that grenade right at the direction you were throwing it. So they were super effective. And when we got there, we were just notified from our intelligence that, a shipment of 10 or 12,000 of these grenades just made it into Tikrit. So we're like, of course they did. So we were getting hit with those pretty frequently. So what happened was a bunch of kids started throwing grenades at us from a crowded market street. And they were targeting all of the turrets in our vehicles. We were mounted at this time. We were not on the ground. And they were throwing it at the guys who were, had their heads out of the strikers and the MRAPs who were on the guns, and just trying to knock out the fully automatic belt-fed machine gun.
Yeah, they knew what they were targeting first.
Of course,
so they had a strategy.
They have a strategy. They watch. They will provoke just to see how you react, and they will learn your tactics, and they will try to use that how you react to their contact as a telltale of what they'll do when they actually mean it, right? This one was not super big, but it was heavy. When you have like between 8 to 11 people throwing grenades at your trucks, it's a pretty hectic situation. One of my team leaders, who was on the sniper team, he took a grenade to the face. The RKG-3 went through the armor and actually penetrated the turret armor. And he just took a huge blast. He's alive. He made it. He's definitely not seeing well out of one of his eyes. And his face is a little messed up. I actually talked to him about 3 weeks ago. He's doing good. He lives in Georgia. He's got 2 girls. And then some of the grenades blew the doors open on one of the MRAPs, and a bunch of the guys took shrapnel, in their arms and in their legs, and kind of got peppered. But this wasn't a situation where, everybody got rocked all at once. It was just, we got ambushed in a crowded market street while we were in our vehicles. Obviously, you go through the motions, you return fire, you eliminate and neutralize the threat, assess the damage, and continue mission. Daniel Olson, he took the grenade, and he was bleeding pretty bad. We didn't think he was going to make it at that time. So there was no time to stick around and fully engage or to pursue. We returned fire, and we handled that in place until we got the order from our platoon leadership that we need to evacuate immediately because we might have a guy down. So
yeah, isn't that before we go on? Isn't that one of the, I guess, the main things to do when you have a soldier who's down in the unit is to save them first or to protect them.
If you can, then yes.
You can, yeah.
I mean, it really depends. If saving them or protecting them is going to compromise the lives of your soldiers, you have to make a decision, right? And that's one of those things that's completely dependent on that scenario right there. You know, in reality, we're all in trucks. Everybody was mounted. I was up in a turret. I was in a Striker, which is like an 8-wheeled pirate ship. It's like a huge tactical vehicle. You got 2 turrets in the back, 1 in the front, 50 caliber machine gun that's being controlled by a joystick and a screen. It's called an RWS on the inside. So you've got 4 to 5 barrels pointing out of your gun and covering 360. So I was in the back left on a 240 Bravo machine gun, which was actually mounted on the truck. It wasn't my gun. But when we were in movement, that's where I was, machine gunner. So, you know, they were aiming, they were going for us, the guys on the top of the truck with the gun, because they knew they couldn't really penetrate the actual vehicle. Not with those grenades. So, I mean, you're in a crowded street. It's a crazy situation. I remember it so clearly. I remember the tunnel vision. I remember everything slowing down immensely.
Adrenaline is flowing.
And then you react without even thinking about it. It's your training kicks in. And that's the thing about the regimentation, about the muscle memory, repetition when you train, because at no point in time did I stop and think, oh, well, what do I do? I was already on the gun, hand down, got my side picture in and go. And that's how it works. You know, people in Hollywood, they glorify a lot of this stuff. And I mean, I think it's particularly for the first one because it is, you know, and then once it's over, you know, within, 45 seconds, 60 seconds, it's done. Order, hey, Kazovac, we're rolling out. Truck starts moving, and then you maintain security, but you can replay it frame by frame by frame by frame by frame afterwards, which is what I experienced after my first firefight. So that was pretty interesting. That's never happened to me before. That, obviously, that type of reaction. But I, you learn a lesson. When your guys get injured, could have died, right? You know what I mean? It's not for anybody for a lack of not doing their job. I mean, obviously our eyes are on there, but no one's looking for a 10-year-old to throw a grenade at your truck.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? It's one of those things, especially, my first deployment.